So my presentation is entitled The Heyday and Decline of Yiddish Film Exhibition in Israel, and is a part of my doctoral research at Ghent University, supervised by Professor Daniel Bitterst. Okay. Before I delve into the discussion on Yiddish film exhibition, I would like to provide a brief introduction to the historical period I will be focusing on, the early 50s in the newly established Israel. I will then discuss the methodology I have used to establish an empirical ground for this study and the results. Following that, I will explore the heyday period and how audience members made sense of the film they watched. And lastly, I will discuss the possible reasons for the timing of the heyday and decline, connecting the discussions to our theme of silence or silencing. The pictures are from Yiddish films that were successfully screened in Tel Aviv. Okay, so historical background, just a brief introduction. One of the first actions taken by the Provisional State Council was to reverse the restrictions on Jewish immigrations that had been implemented by the British government in the 1930s. This reversal of restriction occurred shortly after the creation of the state, and it resulted in a unique situation in modern history where immigrants significantly outnumbered the host society. The Israeli population doubled within 3 years and tripled within a decade. As we see in the table, just to have an idea, the largest group of immigrants originates from Eastern Europe, primarily Poland. So the larger group speaks Yiddish, followed by a sizable group that speaks various dialects of Arabic. The response of the political elite to these mass immigration waves was the implementation of a policy of assimilation, commonly referred to as the melting pot. The national ethos emphasized the necessity for change and renewal, with one of the main expectations being that immigrants would forsake their native languages in favor of Hebrew. On the ground, however, the situation was different. Going to the cinema was an extremely popular leisure pursuit during these years, similar to the US during the Great Depression. A reader letters to the editor of the Herut newspaper suggests the prominent role played by foreign film exhibition during this period. It reads as follows. We have austerity now on the agenda. The government demands sacrifices for the people and requires that we save and shrink everything possible, even the most essential food needs. But how are things with regards to films? There is no other country in the world where films are shown in so many languages as in here. We can receive the impression that languages or cultures that should have been repressed found a place for expression in the cinema. To understand the type of films that attracted audiences at the time, I collected film programming information from contemporary daily newspapers. First, I collected information on films that were screened at the Eden Cinema in Tel Aviv from 1950 until its closure. The Eden, the 800-seat theater that we can see in the picture, was the primary venue for showcasing Yiddish films nationwide during the period. Therefore, examining this single theater provides insight into what films interested the audiences in when. Second, I examined the entire municipality for Tel Aviv Jaffa, which was the cultural capital, for 3 sample years in 1950, 53, and 58. This provides us with an indication of the prevalence of Yiddish films in various parts of the city and the types of theaters where they were shown. So the results, before we start to analyze, The examination of the Eden cinema shows that Yiddish films were very popular in 1950 and reached a peak in 1951. As we see in the graph, Yiddish films made up more than half of the Eden's program. Since then, the prominence of Yiddish films gradually decreased. 1954 was the last year that Yiddish films were screened at the theater, accounting for only 15% of the program that year. And the municipality, the information collected for the entire municipality further supports the information gathered from the Eden cinema. In terms of quantity of films, in 1950, the percentage of Yiddish films in the entire city was nearly double than that of 1953. There has been a decrease also in terms of spatial distribution. In 1950, Yiddish films were screened across the city. In addition to the main venue, the Eden Cinema, the screening took place in Jaffa and other prominent venues in central Tel Aviv, such as the Esther Cinema that we can see in this postcard. By 1953, the spatial distribution had decreased, with all screenings exclusively held at the Eden Cinema and in Jaffa. The film advertisement can provide us with some insight into film exhibition trends and audience expectations. These are advertisements from the peak of the period, 1950. These are two examples. On the right is an advertisement for a screening at the Migdalor Cinema, one of the largest cinema theaters in Tel Aviv, with nearly 1,000 seats. We see in the advertisement that the Migdalor chose to celebrate the New Jewish Year with the Yiddish film A Vilna Legend. It was a popular tradition in different venues to commemorate Jewish holidays by screening Yiddish films. On the left is an advertisement for a screening of the film My Son at the Eden Cinema. The title is written in both Hebrew and Yiddish, which was typical. And the film is presented as the great Jewish film. The term Jewish film was also a common way to address Yiddish film. Both advertisements featured the name of actors who were familiar to the audience. The Yiddish advertisements were often very elaborate and included the names of musicians, bands, and playwrights, sometimes the authors. We can see how this film served as a way to connect to the culture of the Jewish diaspora. Additionally, both films are relatively old. A Vilna Legend was actually a reissue of the 1920s a Polish film, so it was extremely old by 1950. In general, Yiddish films tended to be much older than films screened elsewhere. And this raises a curious question about audience expectations. One way to answer this question is through audience testimonies and oral history interviews. The following segment is from my interview with Moshe, who was born in the early 40s in Tel Aviv to a family from a Lithuanian background. Moshe spoke about the double value of Yiddish films for Yiddish-speaking audience. I quote, "There were many films, so it is clear that the Yiddish-speaking Tel Aviv audience, of course, they went to see them. It's both childhood memories and usually Jigen and Schumacher, right, it was humor. But humor is something that comes from pain. So that too, you laugh and cry at the same time." In other words, Moshe describes how, aside from the nostalgic elements of the films, Yiddish film screenings also serve as a space for collective mourning. The following segment is from a published interview with the Iraqi-born renowned author Sami Michael, who immigrated to Israel in 1949. I quote, "I love attending the Yiddish film screen at the Eden Cinema in Tel Aviv. I watched the Jewish films they made in Poland in Yiddish before World War II. They spoke to me, reminded me of a Baghdadi Jewish way of life in a positive sense. The appearance of the bearded elderly, the hand movements, and the internal Jewish content in quotes. It is interesting to note that the nostalgia for Jewish diasporal life was not only limited to the Yiddish speaking communities. And the last quotation, together with the mass immigration context, another factor to consider is that Yiddish has been a minority language locally for generations. The following segment is from my interview with Sarah, who was born in 1940 in Tel Aviv to a family from an Adeni background, Aden, the port city in today's Yemen, and I quote, "Then there were films in Yiddish, which it seemed very natural to me because we also had a house in Jerusalem, if you know Jerusalem of the past. Then also it would look like these towns in Poland. The small houses, the community life, the same. There were small streets, and you see the Ashkenazim, and you hear the prayer, and the grocery store, and the ease in which one speaks. I felt, when I saw the films in Yiddish, as if I was in Jerusalem." Lastly, the topic of silencing, because of course there were differences between the year, and the pattern changed very dramatically. As previously mentioned, the heyday of Yiddish film exhibition peaked in 1951 and began to decline in the following year. Alongside the backdrop of mass immigration, I would argue that the timing of this rise and fall can be attributed to two strands of silencing. The first strand has to do with the restrictions that were imposed on Yiddish theater between 1949 and 1951 in Israel. This was one of the manifestations of the melting pot policy. The majority of Yiddish films from the 1930s were adaptations of stage plays, with the remaining ones relying on their stars, writers, and conventions. The high demand for Yiddish films during the exact period suggests that they have served to fill the void resulting from the restrictions on Yiddish performances. The second reason has to do with the press coverage. Despite their apparent popularity, Yiddish films received very scant or derogatory coverage in the Hebrew press. A journalist from the Kol Ha'am Daily, for instance, against the Yiddish films in 1952 is a national disgrace, asking, what do we have to do with these caricatures of Jews? This type of coverage reflects the overall ambivalent or negative sentiment toward Yiddish language and culture at the time. I suggest that expanding the discussion to film exhibition can help us gain further insight into observation previously made regarding the status of Yiddish during these years. Thank you very much for listening, and this is my contact information if anyone would like to get in touch. Thank you.